Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new patch to be released on the 8th of September called Quantum Cores. So ordinarily I wouldn't cover patch notes, however this one will affect high-sec manufacturers directly and therefore I thought I better cover it in a little bit of detail. Now I'm going to go and read through the patch notes and then I'm going to explain my thoughts on how I feel this might affect manufacturing. In the continuing efforts to revisit and iterate on core gameplay features of EVE, a new update to structures is coming. These upcoming changes will have a timeline associated with them which you can read about below. In the next release on 8th of September, Quantum Core will be introduced, and there will be an integral mechanic to structural gameplay moving forward. Quantum Cores will become a necessary item involved in the deployment phase of structures. In order for a structure to fully complete its development phase, the Quantum Core must be installed into the structure after the initial 24-hour anchoring phase. Once the structure becomes dockable after this anchoring phase, the Quantum Core will need to be installed into the core room in order for the structure to proceed past the initial onlining vulnerable state. Once the Quantum Core is installed, the structure will begin a 15-minute repair timer that, when completed, will transition the structure into a shielded vulnerable state. If no Quantum Core is installed, the structure will remain onlining vulnerable stage, where the full HP layer is exposed and the structure is vulnerable to destruction. The Quantum Core is installed in the most central and heavily protected location within the structure, and because of this security will always survive the ultimate destruction of this structure intact. That is to say that the Quantum Core will drop 100% of the time from the structure's explosion. If a structure is unanchored instead of destroyed, the Quantum Core will not be destroyed, but will be placed into the same container and any fitted modules or services would be. And then CCP has a flowchart here detailing the onlining process, all the way down to explode. So here comes the interesting part. So each structure will require its own specific core variant to be installed. The table below reflects the required cores of each structure. So for the Astra House we've got a value of 600 million ISK for the core and a size of 500 M3. Athanor, Ritaru, Fortizar, etc, etc, etc. Now as you can see the price obviously scales depending on the size, so for the small structures you're looking at a maximum of 800 mil. For the intermediate structures you are looking between 3 and 4 bill, and for the large structures you're looking at 30 billion and 100 billion. And then we've got the size of the cores themselves. So again, for the small cores we've got 500 M3, for the intermediates we've got 50,000, and for the large we've got 250,000 M3. So you've got 500 M3 for the small, you've got 50,000 for the intermediate, and you've got 250,000 M3 for the large structures. Now I'm going to assume that these are the final sizes due to this being on the blog, because currently on the test server it is showing a slightly different value. So we've got 332,000 M3 here. Now I would expect the test server to come in line with the patch notes here, but you never know. So all the Quantum Cores will be available to purchase from stations owned by the NPC Corps, and the following NPC corporations will purchase the Quantum Cores. So it sounds like they will be NPC orders set up automatically that you can just sell it straight to. So the rollout will consist of 3 distinct phases. So beginning with the update on the 8th of September, Quantum Cores will become available on the market. This will allow you to begin acquiring them and moving them to your existing structures in space, or to prep deployment for a new structure. All existing structures will have a new bay available to them, the core room. During the seeding phase you will also have the ability to install the core at any existing structure. Room will be fully prepared for the future. Required for new structures. The second phase of the rollout will reinforce the rule that the Quantum Cores will be a required installation to complete the anchoring process for any newly deployed structures. This phase is expected to go live during the October update. Deploying a structure in space will also include a notice of a requirement for the installation of the core through the deployment UI window when choosing a station name, profile, and the reinforcement settings. Required for existing structures. The final phase of the rollout for the Quantum cores will see some basic services that all structures offer become disabled until the core is installed. Without a core installed, fitting, tethering, repair services will be disabled. As soon as the core is installed into a structure, these services will become operational again. This phase is expected to go live in the December update. Consequences and stakes. In EVE, death is a serious matter. Many of the current efforts in the EVE ecosystem are focused on the consequences of player actions and the stakes required to make them. It should mean something every time you place a structure and every time you destroy one. At the moment this isn't the case. Deploying a structure haphazardly to bait opponents is often seen by many as a good strategy, because raising them down can be unsatisfying and laborious. By placing an ante in the core of every structure in space, the amount of structure spam will be reduced, the incentive and reward for attacking structures will be increased, and the chance of both sides showing up to fight is also increased. So if we take another look at the costs for the cores for the structures themselves. So now when thinking about setting up a structure in HiSec, assuming it's one of the smaller structures, you've now got a 6, 7 or 800 million ISK extra expense on top of that. And again, not only that, but now people have an incentive to attack the station itself. So a lot of people do put them up in HiSec for 1, 2, 3 man corps or for alt corps. And generally, if you keep to yourself, stations in HiSec, player-owned stations, are relatively safe, assuming they don't go offline. And again, as per the bottom, that was generally due to the fact that taking down a structure isn't particularly hard. You can do it with a handful of characters, but it's quite laborious. It does take a little bit of time, and you've got to show up back for the reinforced states, etc. And then at the end of it, you weren't guaranteed to get anything decent drop at all. Most of the time, the stuff can be shifted out of the stations, etc. And all you're going to be left with was the structure carcass, which you might be able to salvage, and again the salvage can be quite questionable. And that's resulted in quite a lot of structure spam in HiSec. You can't go through a system now without finding multiple player-owned stations in them. So with this new mechanic, you will probably find now that obviously deploying your own structure for a small corp isn't really going to be a great idea, because there is now a very big or a very decent incentive for people to attack them if they aren't defended by a decent amount of people, we'll say a semi-sizable corp, or if people aren't willing to come up and defend them, i.e. if you are a one-man manufacturer with a band of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, God knows how many alts, then trying to actually fight an organised band is nigh on impossible. So for that reason, deploying a structure if you are a small or one-man corp has just become a lot more hazardous. I can see a lot of people pulling their current ones down in HiSec over the coming months. So I kind of like this change and I dislike this change, and I'll go through my thoughts on why that is. The CCP has recently changed structures that obviously if you are AFK or basically leave the game and you have a structure in space, it will run out of fuel. Once it runs out of fuel, it can be attacked, and if there is anything left in that structure, it will be dropped for the attacker. Now obviously that helped destroy quite a few early on, and gives the incentive of obviously not leaving a structure unmanned for any period of time. Prior you could just leave it up, and the chances are that when you came back it would still be there, because as iterated below, attacking a structure was generally quite laborious and didn't really reap any rewards. Now, I don't know the numbers, but I imagine quite a few of these player-owned structures were removed not long after that, due to the fact that everybody went on a feeding frenzy in and around HiSec, and tens of trillions, I imagine, of ISK were dropped from these structures. That obviously cleaned up the landscape and, yeah, removed quite a lot of them from HiSec, which obviously is a good thing. And now obviously with this, you now have for the attacker another added incentive to attack a station that hasn't run out of fuel. And now there will always be a guaranteed drop at the end of it. Now that has to be a good thing, due to the fact that obviously there is a reason to try and defend your station, and now there is a reason to attack one. So what I imagine will happen is the corps in HiSec will form that are just dedicated sandcastle kickers, and will roam HiSec, basically just knocking down as many of these as possible, either ransoming them back or just destroying them and selling the cores. Now, as an attacker, it is generally easier to attack a station than it is as a defender to defend it. That's generally because the attackers will have more experience. They're dedicated for taking down structures, etc. Whereas a defender, if you are a manufacturer, etc., then obviously you aren't necessarily geared for huge amounts of PvP, and neither are likely to be the rest of the corp in there. So this will, I assume, limit the amount of people that will be wanting to put these structures up, due to the fact that obviously now they can be kicked over and there is a decent incentive for kicking them over. And if you aren't able to defend your own station, then maybe there is a good reason why you shouldn't be putting one up. However, in the past, obviously, it wasn't worth kicking over other people's sandcastles other than just to grief or just because you could. And also, just looking here, the pricing structure in regards to the ISK value is a little odd. The Astra House is 600 million ISK for the core here. Now the Astra House itself is currently on Tranquility, selling at 720 million ISK, so the core is almost the exact same value as the structure itself. And again, with the Ritaru you can buy for 500 million, and yet the core is over what you are going to pay for the station. Now with the Fortizar, obviously the Fortizar is selling for, let's have a look, $10 billion ISK, so that's half the price for the Fortizar. However, the Zabel is 3 billion ISK, and the core is 3 billion ISK, so again that's the same price as. Now with the last station here, 24, well that's half the price, so I'd have assumed, rightly or wrongly, that that would have been roughly the same price as the station, which would have been around 24. We'll assume that's got a markup up, so we'll say 20, but it's half the price. And again, same, maybe not quite the same with the Keepstar, because obviously the Fortizar is half the price roughly as the structure. So half the price of the Keepstar. Yeah. Can't tell you what the Keepstar is offhand, but for 30 billion is, I imagine, quite a lot cheaper than the Keepstar cost to buy. Is it less than half? Is it a quarter of the price? 110 billion ISK, 120. So yeah, it does reduce slightly, but as I say, the Zabel and the Stoya, yeah, doesn't seem to match up with the cost. As I said, that is the same price as the structure itself, and yet that is half the price, so I don't quite know how they've come to the conclusion of the pricing values. However, if you're thinking about putting up a Keepstar or a Stoya, then I imagine that you are probably not watching this channel. So yeah, I think basically the crux of it is if you were thinking about setting up a station in HiSec, etc., then obviously it has just become a lot more expensive, and it has become a lot more dangerous in order to do so. and I imagine that will result in quite a lot of them being taken down, potentially scrapped, sold on the market, or as I say, scrapped, because nobody's going to be buying them, because obviously there'll be more demand because more are being blown up, but less demand because less are being put out. So yeah, watch this space for that. However, if you are reprocessing them, then you will obviously get the PI items for them if they're not able to be sold, and that may drop the price of PI in the very near future, or at least hold it down. So that's something to think about if you are into PI. So yeah, quite interesting. That will shake things up quite a lot. It will probably also affect fuel, because obviously there won't be as much fuel required because there won't be as many stations in space. So the chances are people mining ice will take the hit, people making fuel blocks will take the hit because not as many are being sold, and again, repercussions all the way through the economy, one way or another. And I think we'll end the video there. So hope that was interesting, informative. Let me know your thoughts on this, whether you think it's bad, good, etc. Always interested to know. And if there's anything I've missed or you'd like to point out, then please do. Other than that, fly safe and good luck.